I'll just get into it because I have to cede the mic at some point to the audience. And I want to start with, obviously, the pandemic and the fact that pandemics come, or at least they tend to coincide with large-scale societal failure, or at least that's an idea that goes back as far as the Bible. But even before the pandemic, we had plenty of global horrors, namely a brutal and unrelenting inequality. In the United States, 1% of the population owns 40% of the wealth. 15% of the world's wealth is concentrated in the European Union and the United States. And just thinking of the pandemic alone, while so many people were struggling to survive, to live, to make ends meet, one new billionaire was created every 17 hours. At the same time, more or less, the number of people living in extreme poverty rose by 100 million. Death from hunger tops even the alarming coronavirus death rates. And so I want to ask you to start by speaking to us about how this kind of rampant inequality has brought us to where we are today, and how it has impacted the global handling of the pandemic.
I don't want to romanticize earlier years. There were plenty of flaws during the period that economists call regimented capitalism or embedded liberalism. Basically, the New Deal program, the social democratic programs initiated pretty much by the U.S. New Deal in the 1930s. Remember, in the 1930s, the world was facing very serious problems, not like today, but very serious. And there were several ways out. Continental Europe moved towards fascism. The United States moved towards social democracy. In the post-war period, that was picked up by Europe, developed a range of social democratic programs. That lasted pretty much through into the 1970s. There's plenty of resistance by the business world, but was never able to overcome the enormous support for this basic framework of programs. So take, say, Dwight Eisenhower, the last authentic conservative in US politics. For him, the New Deal was untouchable. Said straight out, any political figure who doesn't accept the New Deal programs just doesn't belong in our system. Anyone who challenges in any way the right of working people to organize in unions simply is not part of our political system. That's the 1950s. That's a time when the Republicans in the United States were still an authentic political party. Took part in parliamentary politics that's long past. By the 1970s, for various reasons, the counterattack by the business world was succeeding. They were pushing back against the mildly social democratic programs of the earlier era. By the late 1970s, I'm now talking about the United States, but similar things elsewhere. By the late 1970s, with President Carter, who was very anti-labor, a Democrat, the dikes started breaking. 1978, the head of the United Auto Workers, Doug Fraser, pulled out of a labor management conference that Carter was running with a bitter statement. I can't only paraphrase, but basically he said that business has launched a one-sided class war against the poor, the working class, and much of the middle class, and they want to essentially destroy the programs that supported the general population, and he's not going to be part of it. It was a rather belated recognition. Business is always fighting a class war. In the United States, with a highly conscious business class, it's intense, goes far back. The United States has a very violent labor history as compared with Europe, for example. But by 1978, Fraser recognized it too late. Then came Reagan, Thatcher, and the one-sided class war was just open. Not even, no effort to conceal it. Reagan and Thatcher's first moves, sensible moves, were to eliminate the possibility of defense by attacking labor movements, seriously undermining the labor movement with, in fact, what were generally regarded then as completely illegal tactics like scabs, permanent replacement workers. Reagan opened the door on all sorts of other options for the rich to gorge. There was an economic policy. It was pretty explicit. The economic guru of the administration, Milton Friedman, had his doctrine became open and prominent. It was very explicit. Corporations have no responsibility other than self-enrichment, which of course means enrichment of the management and the CEO. Reagan's program announced in his inaugural lecture is government is the problem, not the solution.